Hello everyone, welcome to the AWS Online Tech Talks. My name is Rajesh Rathod and I am a Senior Product Manager at AWS. Today's topic is application migrations using AWS Server Migration Service or SMS. So let's dive right in. This is an educational tech talk that will cover cloud migration drivers, challenges, and various services offered by AWS. During this tech talk, we will learn how to migrate existing applications from on-premises hypervisors like VMware, Hyper-V, or Microsoft Azure to AWS. And we will also see a demonstration of migrating a multi-tiered Windows application, that is a SharePoint application from VMware to AWS. And we will see how to launch that into AWS using auto-generated CloudFormation template. In another demonstration, we will migrate a .NET application from Microsoft Azure to AWS. And at the end, we will discuss few best practices and frequently asked questions before we open it up for any other questions. Our customers go through a typical migration journey, but it all starts with some of the business drivers in their organizations. So you will be familiar with some of this business drivers like data center consolidation, cost reduction, or it could be around improving agility and staff productivity, or using native AWS services like IoT or AI ML. While our customers typically follow a migration process which has been proven by many other customers in migrating their enterprise workloads, the process involves 4 different phases. The first one is an assessment phase. This is the phase where you will build a business case and perform cloud readiness assessment of your organization. The second phase is where you start detailed planning of various migration tasks. You define your AWS architecture and you mobilize businesses to migrate at scale. The third phase is the migration execution phase. In this phase, you will start moving workloads from on-premises to AWS, and you will use automation tools like AWS Server Migration Service to perform those migrations. And we will discuss a lot more about migration phase today. Once you migrate, the journey doesn't end. The fourth phase is around operations and optimization. In this particular phase, you will iterate on your new foundation of AWS. You will turn off your old systems and you'll be constantly iterating on improving and optimizing that infrastructure. While our customers migrate to AWS, there are some common challenges that they consider and plan upfront. Some of these challenges are pretty common for any IT migrations. Few will be specific to migrating to a cloud infrastructure. So challenges like you are dealing with busy, continuously changing workloads. So how you can have live migration of those workloads. That's something that you need to plan upfront. There will be machine compatibility issues, or you are dealing with situations where you cannot afford any downtime or performance disruption during this migration. One challenge that customers plan upfront is whether they can get any agents installed to perform migrations. If there are delays in approving agent installations, they want a solution which is agentless. So after hearing this customer feedback and discussing challenges, AWS has created a very comprehensive set of services. This is a portfolio of our migration services that help you traverse through this entire journey. So we have services for assessment phase like TSO logic. For readiness and planning, there are multiple services our customers use: application discovery service, control tower, and landing zone. And when it comes to the migration execution phase, depending on the use case, there are different services available. So we will discuss in next slide how to select right service for right use case. Uh, if you are going to migrate a database, you use database migration service. If you are going to migrate to VMs, you have few options. If you are going to do a disaster recovery solution, there is a different product for that. So all of these services are created based on a particular use case. These are just AWS services, but our partners have also created many tools which are available on AWS Marketplace for different phases of migration. Throughout this migration journey, you can use AWS Migration Hub to track progress right from assessment to optimization. So now let's understand when to use which migration execution service. So if you are okay to install agents and have a need to rehost a large number of machines, that's like thousands of machines that you want to move from multiple platforms like physical, virtual, or another cloud, you can use CloudEndure service. So CloudEndure migration is the service which helps you with this use case. Now, if you are looking for an agentless solution, an agentless solution for migrating a large number of on-premises VMware, Hyper-V, or Azure workloads, you can use AWS Server Migration Service. Now, there are a few other options available. If you are using a VMware infrastructure and you want to relocate your VMs while maintaining consistent operations, you have an option of using vMotions for VMware Cloud on AWS. So that is an option that many of our customers, VMware customers, use as well. And if you have a different use case of disaster recovery, CloudEndure DR is the solution which can help you minimize your recovery point objective and recovery time objective for all your applications. The solution will also help in reducing traditional disaster recovery expenses that you incur. So with this background, let's understand what is AWS Server Migration Service. So it is agentless service which makes it easy and fast for you to migrate thousands of on-premises workloads to AWS. That could be from VMware, Hyper-V, or from other cloud solutions like Azure. Some of the benefits of AWS Server Migration Service are, one is it's very easy to get started. You can use this native AWS service and its management console to schedule replications, define all configurations, and even launch applications into AWS. It doesn't have any dependency on installation of agents. The service uses Server Migration Connector, which is a predefined, pre-configured virtual machine. So we will discuss in next slide how that works. Also with SMS, you can schedule incremental replication for faster migration and reduce the amount of downtime which you would have otherwise. Also, this is a very cost-effective migration solution because there is no additional cost for using AWS Server Migration Service. So some of the features of AWS Server Migration Service are, it supports multi-server application migrations. So you can migrate multiple applications which in turn have dependencies on different servers. So you can schedule migration of all of those applications together and define the dependencies between different servers. SMS also supports AMI encryption feature, which many of our customers use for migrating workloads which require additional security considerations. Also, the service is integrated with AWS Migration Hub, so you will be able to track the progress of a migration journey through Migration Hub, and also you can import any applications which are defined in the Migration Hub. With SMS, you have end-to-end automation of replication from on-premises to AWS, and also it supports incremental replication of live server volumes. So that way, once you do base migration, you don't need to do entire migration. You can just do an incremental migration and replicate the delta changes to AWS, and you can optimize on the network bandwidth required. It is a native AWS service, so you have a benefit of using AWS Management Console-based graphical user interface, and you have a transparency of entire migration process. So how does AWS Server Migration Service really work? So when you begin, you have all your virtual machines in your on-premises data center or in Azure, and you create your AWS account where you want to migrate these virtual machines. So to achieve this objective, the first step is to deploy server migration connector. So this is a pre-configured virtual machine which will be deployed in the hypervisor, and this connector is going to connect the source infrastructure to the target infrastructure, which is the AWS account here. Once this connector is deployed, you can use the server migration service, which takes multiple steps, and it's all automated to help you migrate the workload. The first step is this connector is going to start taking snapshots of the virtual machines and store those in the S3 bucket. So with these snapshots available in S3, Server Migration Service can then start using another service, VM Import Export Service, to convert those snapshots into Amazon Machine Images or AMIs. Also with Server Migration Service, you would have opportunity to define your landing zone information. So that is the VPC you want to use, the subnet, and also your launch sequence. So all this information will be available with Server Migration Service. And when it combines this information with AMI, the service will be able to create AWS CloudFormation template. So this CloudFormation template can be downloaded or used directly to deploy applications in AWS. With the integration with AWS Migration Hub, if there are applications which are discovered in Migration Hub, that application definition can be imported in AWS Server Migration Service as well. So that way this service automates the task required to migrate enterprise applications or individual servers from on-premises infrastructure to AWS. So now let's move on to a few demonstrations. So today our first demonstration is to show how you can set up Server Migration Connector and import server catalog, which is the inventory of servers from your VMware infrastructure. Okay, so when you use the SMS service for the first time, you need to set up the Server Migration Connector to connect your on-premises environment to your AWS account. So let's start with this setup process. We'll go to the SMS connectors page and open SMS connector setup guide. So this guide helps you download right connector for your environment. So you can download a connector for vCenter environment, that is an OVA file, or for your Microsoft Hyper-V environment. And if you're working with Azure environment, you can download this PowerShell script. For the first demonstration, let's open the OVA file because we are going to demonstrate how to set up connector for VMware environment. Okay, so I have downloaded that here, and now I'm in my VMware vSphere client. So this SMS connector that you see, that is the OVA file that I have deployed here. So let me show how this registration works. So I'm going to go to the connector page again. now that this has been deployed, and I will register this with my SMS service. Okay, so registration is a simple 5-step process. You agree on license terms, also set up your password, and look at various network configurations. If you need to define any static IPs or change any proxy settings, you can do it here. I'm going to move to the next step. Okay, here I can decide whether I want to auto upgrade my connector or send logs automatically. Let's move to the next step. So this is the first set of credentials that I need to provide, and this is for AWS. So I'll pick the AWS region and define my credentials to the account. Okay, I have already defined my AWS account credentials. The next step is to specify credentials for my VMware environment. So I'll give the VMware host name, username, and password. The user that I'm using here has write permissions at data store level, application level, VM level, and host level. So I can perform migrations and replications from VMware environment to AWS. So I'll trust this certificate, and my connector has been registered here. So let me check the status. Okay, so the connector is in a healthy state, and I can see all the details about that it is connected with vSphere environment, and this is my connector IP address. The step with this connector, now I can import the inventory, the server inventory from VMware environment to AWS. So let's see here, it is importing all the information, and once all the servers are available in my SMS service, I can use that to initiate migrations. Okay, so here you can see all the VMs which were running on VMware environment are available now. So we can demonstrate how to migrate. So we'll pick one of the servers that we want to migrate. That's our Windows server. Let's create a replication job, and I have an option to pick whether I'm going to bring my own license or use AWS provided license. In this case, I'll just pick AWS. Okay, let's go to next. Now here I can decide whether I want to do one-time migration or I want to schedule migration at every 1 hour or 3 hours. So I have picked 1 hour, and I want to start the migration immediately. There is an option to encrypt armies, and also specify whether I want to enable automatic deletion of the armies. One feature that a lot of our customers use is they enable notifications, so they get notified with the progress of replication. So let's move to the next step. So I check everything looks okay. Let's create. So with this step, now we have a replication job already created. So we will be seeing these steps a few times when we migrate the applications in subsequent demonstrations as well. But in this demo, you can see how easy it is for you to set up your server migration connector and initiate migration of any servers. So now let's move on to the next demonstration, which is around migrating SharePoint application from VMware environment to AWS. So this is a use case where enterprise applications can be migrated. So first up, let me show how the SharePoint application is deployed in the VMware infrastructure. So this is my vSphere, and I'll now browse to the SharePoint application. So you see SharePoint app 2. That's where I have 3 servers. One is Active Directory server, the second one is the SharePoint web app, and third is the SQL database server. So I want to migrate this application. For this demonstration purpose, I have already migrated the Active Directory server because it is being used by multiple other applications as well. So we will see how to migrate remaining servers, which is the SharePoint web app and our SQL server in this step. So let's see one of the pages which has been deployed on this SharePoint. We will use this as a test case. So here is a blog that we can see test post 2 and test post. Once we complete this migration, we will see how this blog is rendered on AWS environment as well. So first, let's go to the SMS console. So we have our connector running. So I'll directly jump onto the applications page. Here, let me create a new application. So I'll give the application name. Okay, description is just a note for myself. I've selected the right role. Let's go next. Now I'll select the servers that I need to migrate. So we were migrating SharePoint app server and SharePoint database server. So I have these two servers because I'm going to manage this in my EC2 environment, and I want to define specific instances for both of them. Let me define right groups. So the first group, I'll say app. That's for the app server. Second is for database server. So if I had multiple databases or multiple apps that I'm migrating, and I categorize them by groups, I can specify application server specific or database server specific configuration in my next steps. So this grouping is very helpful. Let's move to the next step. Here I can define up to 50 different tags. These tags will be passed over to EC2 when I manage that. So these are my EC2 key values that I've specified here. Let's go to the next step, review. Everything looks okay. That we have this applications defined, I'm going to specify the replication settings. So let's click on configure replication settings. Again, I'll keep some of the same settings. 1 hour, no AMI encryption. Let's move on to the next step. So I'm going to define licenses. Now that we are dealing with multiple servers, and if I want to have same license type for all of them, I can configure them by clicking on edit multiple servers. So I'll select AWS for all of them and apply it to all groups. So this makes it easy. Let's go to the next step. Okay, go next. So we have our replication settings configured. When we are dealing with application migration, an important aspect is how this application will be launched into EC2. So let me define launch settings here. So first launch setting is around the order of deployment. So when I'm migrating SharePoint, I want to launch database first and application server second. So that's how I have set up, and I'll now define which instances this server should be running on. So let's pick the same instance for all of them for this demo purpose. Okay, so I have that defined, and I have the key pair. Whenever we are migrating applications, there could be some configurations that we want to specify upfront, so we can automatically execute those scripts. So I am using user data scripts here that will be executed at the time of launch. So let me explain what is included in this script. So there are two scripts that I have used for this demonstration. The first one is for SharePoint configuration. So this has registry entries that store the IP address of the SQL database. that SharePoint will connect to. And we will use this PowerShell script to update IP addresses of SQL servers in AWS. Next, let's look at the SQL Server configuration script. So this includes a couple of queries that will be executed. First, we will fetch the SQL Server details on AWS and run these two queries. This query is going to set the server name here. So we have the server name. And second, it is going to identify all configurations wherever this IP is used and update to the right SQL Server IP. Now, this is important because we want this application server to integrate with right SQL Server and use that as a backend. So this script is going to help us with that step. Let's move on to the next. Okay. So here we are going to define the landing zone information. So we will have a VPC that we want to use, the subnet, and the security group. So with this landing zone information, our applications will be deployed to the right landing zone. And I can specify that I want this publicly accessible. Move to the next step. Okay. So now I have all the setup done. So I'm going to save this settings. So this application is now ready to start the replication. So there are a few steps that I need to perform. So first one is, let's go to the actions menu and see what all options are available. The first one is obviously starting the replication. So let me start replication here. Start. Okay, so now the replication is in progress. Because I'm replicating this for the first time, it is going to, the amount of time required will depend on the available network bandwidth as well as size of my source system, my application size. So we'll continue this replication, but for the demonstration purpose, I have another application for which the base replication has already happened. So let me go to that application in a different region and show you how it looks once the application is already replicated. So here you can see that the SharePoint application is already replicated. Both the servers are replicated. So let me demonstrate how to launch this application into AWS. So I'll again go back to the actions menu. And here I have an option to launch application. Okay, so click launch. So now the launch process has been initiated. And it is going to give me the status. So I can go to the launch tab and see that the launch progress can be tracked. While the launch is in progress, we will see a couple of other options which are available. So let's go to the actions menu. I can actually download the CloudFormation template from here. So I can generate the template. And let's generate this. It is going to save this template in S3, and I can download and view and make sure that all the configurations that I had specified, the servers that I'm migrating, all of them are present correctly in my CloudFormation template. So here's the CloudFormation template. So you can see there is this SP, which is the SharePoint web app. There is SQL, which is my database, and the configuration scripts for both of them are available in this script. I'll close this and I'll look at the CloudFormation stack now. So let's click on the CloudFormation stack and look at the status. Okay, so our CloudFormation stack has been created. In resources, I can see the two instances, both are available. The another option, let's go back to the actions menu. So once the first time one-time replication is completed and application has been deployed in EC2, my source system can still change. So the subsequent replications will take care of creating new armies, and I can deploy them with generate change set. So I can generate the change set, or I can launch the change set. So that will make my target application up to date with whatever changes has happened on premises. Okay, so now that this application has been replicated, let's look at how this is deployed in our AWS environment. So let me RDP to my SharePoint on AWS. Okay, so I'll copy the URL and connect there. So now that we have migrated this SharePoint application to AWS and all servers are launched, here we can see on AWS the SharePoint application is launched, and we can see the same blog that we had viewed at the beginning of the migration. So that concludes our demonstration for migrating a SharePoint application from VMware environment to AWS. So we have seen how you can use AWS Server Migration Service to migrate a SharePoint application from VMware environment to AWS. In next demonstration, we are going to migrate a .NET application from Microsoft Azure to AWS. So first up, let me show you how this application is deployed in Azure portal. So this is the Azure portal, and you can see that I have an application. This is a .NET application that I want to migrate. And for initiating this migration, I have an SMS connector, which is already deployed. So I have the SMS connector VM West US that has been set up here. So what is this application? Let me go and open this application in a browser and show you how does this application look while it is running on AWS. Okay, so here's the application. It is a simple e-commerce application with SQL backend, and it gets all this catalog information from SQL. So once we complete this migration, we will take a look at this application running on AWS. So I have my, let me go back to Azure portal where I had this SMS connector already installed, and I need to now register this connector with AWS Server Migration Service. So I'm logging in to this connector's IP. Okay, so most of the steps are same, so I'm directly jumping onto the step where it is different, which is on step 5. After specifying AWS credentials, I need to give the Azure credentials. Now, Azure verification happens using object ID of system assigned identity. So here you have steps of where to get that. So it is available from my Azure portal. So I'll go back to Azure portal, open the connector, and navigate to identity. So identity has system assigned object ID, which is available. I can simply copy this from here and go back to connector and paste here. So this is a way of connecting my AWS account with Azure. Now this particular setup is for a given Azure subscription and Azure location. So it connects my Azure subscription and location with AWS account. So if I'm migrating any application from multiple AWS location, Azure locations and subscriptions, I need to have the SMS connector installed for each of those locations and subscriptions. So here you can see that the connector is in healthy state. it is connected with Microsoft Azure, and I'll be able to use this information to start migrations. So let's go to our AWS Server Migration Service console. I can see that this connector is already running. So first step for me is going to be to import the server catalog. So I'm importing that. It should show up all the VMs that I saw in my Azure portal here. And then I can pick right applications that I want to migrate here using SMS. So it is bringing all the inventory information from Azure to AWS. Okay, so these are the servers that I should see. Yep, I can see the same servers here, including the connector. Now that I have these servers, I'm going to go to the Applications tab and define my application. So I'll give the application name, description, and role, and then I move on to the next step here. So this is my e-commerce website. Okay, so let's go to the next step. Okay, so I'm going to pick the servers which are required for me to migrate. That would be the web app server and the SQL server, and I'm going to assign them to respective groups. So again, we'll pick a group for both of them. So this looks pretty similar. So you can see, irrespective of what is the source system, we have a very unified experience for all migrations using SMS. So you can move on to the next step. Here, key value, I'll skip that in this case. We've already seen this in previous demo. Everything looks good. So let's go ahead and create this application definition here. Okay, so application has been defined, and I'm ready to configure my replication settings at this stage. So I'll keep the default settings and move to the next step. Let's go through that. License type is correct as well, and I'll go to the next step. Okay, so we'll save this replication settings. Okay, so replication settings are saved. I'll define the launch settings quickly. Okay, again, I'm going to pick my database first and web tier second. Let's go to the next step. Okay, so we have defined the order. Now let's pick the right instance type here. Okay, I'll use the same instance and a key pair. We'll use the configuration settings. Okay. All right. So again, this experience is same as what we have seen earlier. So I'll quickly move on to the next step, and I'll define my landing zone information here. Right, VPC and subnet security group. We will make the web tier publicly accessible in this case, yeah. And the same settings for DB tier. Okay. Okay, so now we have all the settings here. Let's save this. Looks good. Okay, so my launch configuration has been saved successfully. The next step for me is to go to the Applications tab and start replicating first time this application. So I'll go to Actions and start replication. So this will kick off the base replication of all the servers, and while this replication continues, We already have this application already replicated in a different region. So we will look at that and demonstrate how to launch this application in AWS. So here is the replicated. Again, let's look at the servers. It has the same DB tier and web tier. So both of those are available. Let's look at the CloudFormation stack. Click on that. Okay, so it has the stack ready, and we can take a look at this application. It is already, both the instances are running, so we have launched this. So I'm going to move to the step where we can see how this is deployed in AWS. At the beginning of the demo, we saw how it was deployed. So let me open this IIS manager here. Okay, and see. All right, so I have the same application here. It is available, and if I open this in a browser, let me see how that loads up. Okay, so I have the same e-commerce application here with the catalog, right information coming from the SQL server. So this concludes our demonstration of migrating a .NET application from Microsoft Azure to AWS. Okay, so before we conclude today, let's discuss few best practices, additional resources, and frequently asked questions. So here are some of the best practices for using AWS Server Migration Service. Before you start the migration, you can use VM prerequisites, which are available on our public website. This will help you identify any dependencies and confirm that the workloads that you are migrating are compatible and ready for migration. The second best practice is to deploy your SMS connector closer to the hypervisor, and also deploy multiple connectors so you get better scaling in migrating your workloads. Also, you can migrate VMs in different batches, or you can group a set of servers as applications so you can get optimal performance in your migration. A lot of our customers use AWS Private Link with AWS Direct Connect to optimize data transfer during the migration process. Some of the resources which are available on our website, you can get the user guide, there are API references all available, the CLI references, and if you want to understand how AMI encryption works, that is also posted on our website. So we have a couple of blogs that you can use. The first one is for application migration. It explains step-by-step instructions for migrating multi-tier environments to AWS. The second blog highlights all the features of AWS Server Migration Service and how to use them. Also, if you are using CloudEndure for migration, you can use these resources. There are service details and our documentation publicly posted for CloudEndure, which is an Amazon company. So today we have seen a couple of demonstrations for migrating applications from your on-premises environment, that's the VMware environment, and also from the Azure environment. Also, we understood some of the best practices on how to use server migration service and various features which are available for application migration, AMI encryption, scheduling, specifying your landing zone information. So this service makes it fast and easy for you to manage large-scale migrations. So whenever you have a need of agentless migration, you can start using AWS Server Migration Service. Before we end, let me discuss some of the questions that often get asked about AWS Server Migration Service. The first question is, what data does the service connector capture from VMware vCenter? So the AWS Server Migration connector captures VM inventory information that helps you replicate those server volumes to AWS. The second question is, what kind of servers can be migrated to AWS using Server Migration Service? So like we saw in the demonstrations, you can migrate from Azure to AWS. You can migrate any applications which are running on VMware hypervisors. And also you can migrate applications or servers which are on Microsoft Hyper-V environments. What operating systems does the AWS Server Migration Service support? So this service supports migrating Windows servers, different versions from like 2003, 8, 2012, 2016, even Windows 7, 8, and 10. There are various Red Hat Linux versions, SUSE, Ubuntu, and other distributions of Linux. Our website has a detailed list of all the operating systems which are supported here. One question we often get from customers is, how long can I replicate my server volumes from on-premises to AWS? So you can replicate your on-premises server to AWS for up to 90 days using this service. So if you need to increase this limit from 90 days, we recommend that you contact AWS support team. Also, if you are looking for a solution for continuous replication on ongoing basis for DR purpose, disaster recovery purpose, we recommend that you can use CloudEndure DR solution for that. One more question we get is, where are my replicated server volumes stored? So we store all replicated server volumes which are converted in armies and stored in your own AWS account. So this information is available on your AWS account. So with this, we can now discuss any questions which are still unanswered. Throughout this session, we have been answering those questions. But if there are any other questions, please let me know.